Hi, I'm Suzy. I'm a plant-based chef and I'm here with Paul. We are working on the PERNUG project. We're in the PERNUG recipe kitchen and we're going to talk to you a little bit about iron in particular.
Hello, yes, my name is Paul Kroon. I'm a researcher at the Quadram Institute Bioscience here in Norwich. I'm delighted to be here today with Suzy to talk about iron and how we get iron from foods and how we can make sure we're getting enough iron from foods that we eat. Got a few foods in front of us here, Suzy. And many of these are ingredients that would be incorporated into the recipes that we're developing with you in the PERNUG project. We've selected these because these are particularly rich plant sources of iron. So maybe we'll start with one of the best sources of iron in our diets, which is actually breakfast cereals. So here we have 2 biscuits of Weetabix. Cereal sources are often very good. And the other thing about breakfast cereals is they're adding more iron in.
Okay,
they're fortified with iron. So these 2 biscuits here give you about 4.5 milligrams of iron.
How much do you need a day?
That's a very good question. So people at different ages and need different amounts because whether they're developing and growing, and also there are some differences between men and women. People who need the most iron are all women and girls between the ages of 11 and 50. And they need almost 15 milligrams a day. That's the recommended amount for them to try and consume.
So you've got about 4.5 in that. Okay.
Yeah, it's almost a third of what you need. So it's pretty good. Men need about 9 milligrams a day, but adolescent men need a bit more. They need about 9 milligrams a day. You can see there's quite big differences there. It's almost twofold between the low and the high. So it's a lot easier for men to achieve their iron intake, the recommended amount. That is also reflected in the data that the government collects. They do a survey every year to find out whether people are consuming enough of all the different nutrients. And for iron, you see over 50% of women are not consuming enough iron in the UK.
Really?
According to recommendations.
Wow.
That's right. We have some different food ingredients here. We've already talked about the Weetabix, which these 2 biscuits give about 4.5 milligrams. So another good source on this table is this. This is a 200 gram pack of baked beans. There's about 3 milligrams of iron in there. And that's coming from the beans. Pulses and cereals are good sources of iron.
Oh, great.
And then if we look at the spinach, that's a dark green leafy vegetable, and they tend to be quite good sources of iron as well.
Right.
Now we've got a rather large portion here. That's 100 grams of spinach. It looks big. If you were to make it into a spinach salad, then it would be a full meal rather than a side dish.
Yeah.
That's about 2 milligrams of iron. Yeah. If you were to cook it and wilt it down, of course, it would look a lot less on the plate.
It does, doesn't it?
And then here we've got rocket. So rocket also contains some iron. I think we've got about
100 grams.
Is it 100 grams there, is it?
Yes.
So that's a lot of rocket. And now I think contains about 1.5 milligrams of iron.
Yeah.
So again, these green leafy vegetables are another good thing to aim for.
I mean, you can eat that in a salad, but you can also cook with it. So you could put that into a soup.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then at the front, we've got a dried fruit. These are dried apricots. That's 30 grams of dried apricots. And that contains about 1.5 milligrams of iron. And then here we've got a small little dish of almonds. So a lot of nuts are quite good sources of iron as well. And they contain about, again, 1.5 milligrams of iron. What we've actually done now is, we've worked out how much iron there is in these different portions. If you were to consume all of those, you would consume about 15 milligrams of iron.
Okay.
So you would achieve that highest level of requirement
that's a daily,
for women in the UK.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, there are other sources of iron, and if you want to get information about which foods contain what quantity of iron, then you can go to the Quadram Institute website, look up the Food Databanks team there, and they've got a clickable link which will go into a very easily searchable database.
So we've got 2 recipes here from the PERNUG project. This is the tomato and spinach dahl, and this is the Italian bean soup with walnut pesto. Now, what can you tell us about the comparison between these 2 recipes?
Okay, so let's start off with the iron content. This one has about 7.5 milligrams of iron, and this one only has about 3 milligrams of iron. So this one's got 150% more iron content, and I'll explain where that iron's come from and why they're different in a minute. And then the other big difference between them is what we talk about iron absorption. How much of the iron that you ingest in your food is absorbed, and it's only a small part of it. So we've estimated with this one, it's about 7.5%, which is okay. But with this one, it's only 1.5%.
It's quite low.
So you're not absorbing much of the iron, even though it's got iron in it. So where is the iron coming from? In this bean dish here, there are 2 kinds of bean in there, and they provide most of the iron that's in that dish. They come from beans. And pulses, beans and pulses, are rich sources of iron for vegetarians and vegans. And similarly in this one, the lentils are the most important provider of the iron in the recipe. You've also got some from the spices, because we saw you put the spices in earlier, so they also make a contribution to the iron content. So all of the ingredients provide something in terms of iron, but by far and away it's the beans and the lentils that provide the most.
Okay.
The next question is, why is there such a big difference in our estimate of how much of that iron you absorb? We then need to think about what components in these foods might inhibit the absorption of iron. And those things include phytate, which is found in high concentrations in what we call storage organs. So things like pulses, cereals, they're the storage organs of plants, making and things like seeds as well sometimes. And it's a way of the plant storing phosphorus, which we also need and plants need when those new plants are growing. And they store it in something called phytate, and phytate is very good at binding iron and stopping you from absorbing it. And the other thing that can be an anti-nutrient or an iron absorption inhibitor are polyphenols. So we find polyphenols in plants. Some plants contain a lot and some foods contain a lot and others don't contain so much. So in here there's quite a lot of polyphenols in the pesto. Sometimes there's a lot of polyphenols in beans. There's not very much in the lentils. So we can immediately start to see quite a big difference in the polyphenol content.
Right, yeah.
So, many polyphenols actually have health benefits. But in terms of looking at iron absorption, you might want to consume your polyphenol-rich foods at a different time to the time you're trying to get a good dose of iron in your diet.
Right, yeah.
So, for example, don't drink your cup of tea. Tea is a very rich source of polyphenols. Don't drink that, maybe an hour each side of when you're having your meal, or an hour after you've had your meal, because that tea can interfere with the iron absorption. And the same would be true of things like dark chocolate and red wine, unfortunately, as well.